What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you the 21 game releases of 2024 that I am looking forward to and plan on reviewing. As the year is just kicking off, it's a bit of a slow moment for games, so as usual I'm using that time to do some administrative things behind the scenes, such as do some rough planning, of course, which involves taking a look at this year's game releases and trying my best to plan accordingly, accepting that there will be changes along the way. So before we fully dive into this, a few qualifiers. This is a PC channel, so PlayStation exclusive titles like Final Fantasy VII Rebirth or Rise of Ronin aren't things that I'll be looking at, though admittedly they do look pretty cool. Another thing that you won't find on this list is early access titles. This is because I do not review early access titles, though I will be making content for them, which is the case for Unforetold Witchstone, which is coming up, alongside Hades 2, which is set to release into early access this year. I will make videos on those, but it won't be reviews. Another thing, though, is that I am looking at games that actually have, at the very least, a release window for 2024. There are many games I'm looking forward to that are coming up that don't actually have a release window of any sort, such as Clockwork Revolution from In Exile Entertainment. Looks awesome from what I've seen, but I have no idea if that's going to release in 2024, so it's not on this list. A more prominent example of that is Dragon Age Dreadwolf, which I mentioned specifically because I think there's a chance it could release in 2024 when they have their big showcase on it this summer, but as of right now I have no idea. And last but not least, I did want to include a mention on two maybes, which are Last Epoch and Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. I have not decided whether or not I will be reviewing these, but I'll almost certainly do a little bit of content on them just because people have asked for my opinion on them, so naturally I will try to do something. Now with all of that said and out of the way, let's finally dive into this list and start talking about these releases, though I have mentioned quite a few of these previously in other videos here and there, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on each one individually. However, to kick things off, we have the first new release of the year, which is Sovereign Syndicate. This is coming up pretty quickly on January 15th, and it is a narrative game in the style of Disco Elysium in a lot of ways, though this one takes place in a Victorian steampunk London that puts you in the role of a few different characters as you traverse the inner workings of a conspiracy of some kind. If you like a good narrative RPG, I think this one will probably be pretty cool, though you won't have to wait too much longer for my full thoughts on that one. Now, in the second spot, we have Banishers, Ghosts of New Eden, an action-adventure from Don't Nod, involving two ghost hunters, one of which has recently passed away and become a ghost themselves, which puts them in an awkward position. But this game, due out on February 13th, is supposed to have a big emphasis on choice and consequence, where you're going to be both solving cases involving supernatural forces while also battling those cases. I think it has a lot of potential, and we'll have to see how it shakes out. Third up, however, we have Thaumaturge. Out on February 20th, this one puts us in the role of a Thaumaturge, of course, in early 1900s Warsaw, in which we'll be tracking down salutors, or demons that are attaching themselves to people of certain emotional characteristics that they then turn into their hosts. And it's our job to involve ourselves in those mysteries, track these things down, where we'll then battle them before perhaps capturing them and forcing them to work with us as we track down more mysteries of the occult. Certainly an interesting title, looks to be right up my alley, and one of the games I'm certainly more excited for this year, though it was originally out last year, which is a very similar case for Broken Roads, an upcoming CRPG taking place in Australia in a post-apocalypse, with a big emphasis on their moral compass system. It will include things like turn-based combat and whatnot, however, and from the demos and things I've played here and there, I think it has potential, though this one is in a bit of a weird position as its publisher, Versus Evil, just recently got closed down, so I don't know if that's going to affect the release date on this one at all. We'll simply have to see, though as of right now it does not have one, simply early 2024. Right after that, we have Geneforge 2 Infestation, a remake of the classic Geneforge series from Spiderweb Software, which is effectively just a couple people, behind both the Geneforge and Avernum series and a couple other CRPGs, and this series and Avernum actually are just a couple of the prominent CRPGs of old I have yet to go through for the channel, or at least the very prominent ones, not dating back to things like the Gold Box stuff, but a remake of one of those titles after I've already covered the first is certainly an easy place to jump into it, so I'm very excited to cover that one. Broadly speaking, the entire series is about shapers, that is to say wizards who can create life and the ethical and moral complications that come along with that, so it's a pretty unique setting. Number 6, we have Stalker 2, the follow-up to the trilogy from the 2000s. The last one was released in, I believe, 2009. Here we'll be exploring the Chernobyl exclusion zone, which is host to all sorts of deadly anomalies, bizarre enemies and phenomenon, etc. So it certainly has a lot of potential. I am curious how much this one will blend more modern mechanics with the, I would say, surprisingly heavy RPG mechanics of the original trilogy, but otherwise it is due out Q1 2024, so we'll see if it lands. For number 7, we have SKALD Against the Black Priory, a retro RPG that I've been looking forward to for quite some time, that sees you shipwrecked on an island experiencing problems with the occult in a sort of Cthulhu-esque style manner, and the blending of that sort of grim dark fantasy world with its retro stylings has me particularly interested, and I have played its free demo available over on its Steam page, which makes me excited to jump into the full thing. I'm actually looking forward to this one quite a bit, and while I think the looks will certainly put some people off, I've had a blast playing what I have of it. Right now it is planned for Q2 2024, though no full release date. Then we have the curious case of Flintlock Siege of Dawn, a game that was originally due out in, I want to say, 2023 before being pushed back, of course, and it is now set for Q3 2024. This one is going to see us taking on the gods and their armies of the dead as they push up from the underworld trying to overthrow humanity, and we pick up the last remnants fighting back, of course. Otherwise, it's an action-adventure that touts a Souls-like tag as well, but we'll see how much of that's actually in there. But it certainly looks like it could have some potential. But honestly, given the massive delays this one has seen, I'm a little worried about its overall quality, as that tends to not exactly assuage issues. At the number 9 spot, though, we have Avowed, Obsidian's upcoming first-person RPG set in the world of Eora, or the Pillars of Eternity universe. I've talked about this one a lot, so I'll keep it brief. Personally, I'm game for anything Pillars of Eternity related, but it is first person, and you are limited to being either a human or an elf in a world full of, I would say, really cool customization in terms of lore and just different peoples you could potentially play as. So while those individual things I think are a little bit unfortunate for me at least, I am otherwise very excited about it, and I have many more videos on the subject if you're interested. Following that up, however, with Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2, a game beset by more than its fair share of troubled development, if you will, and this is certainly one of those titles that I think could absolutely fall apart at the seams, but as a massive fan of both Vampire the Masquerade and the original game Bloodlines, I am hoping that they pull off a miracle here and it is a good game. But as I always state when I talk about this game, I think you would be naive to think it's going to be some flawless project after all the development trouble it's been through. But one way or another, I'm going to review it, and I do hope it lives up to the name. A game with a very different tone, however, is Another Crab's Treasure, a Souls-like where we play a hermit crab trying to take back its repossessed shell, which sees us fighting all sorts of sea life along the way in a very silly Souls-like adventure, though this one comes with a variety of assist features, such as the ability to just let you one-shot all the bosses by wielding a gun. A bizarre title, it looks hilarious, I absolutely want to play it, no set release date for this. Following that up with Capes, an upcoming tactical RPG that puts you in the role of a variety of superheroes in a world that has long since outlawed their existence, as it has been taken over by villains. I've played a little bit of this via a demo after some people brought it to my attention, and I think it has a lot of potential, and I do love a good tactical RPG, so here we are. At number 13, though, we have New Arc Line, an upcoming CRPG set to release sometime this year in 2024, which is the case for a lot of these, though this one brings together both magic and a sort of steampunk industrial revolution style of stuff, very reminiscent of Arcanum. It seems they took a lot of, I would say, inspiration from that in particular, and as somebody who really loved Arcanum, I am naturally looking forward to this game. But as an isometric CRPG, I was pretty much guaranteed to check this one out. But then we have Greedfall 2, the follow-up, of course, to Greedfall from developer Spiders, which also just happens to be their biggest release. So a sequel to that very solid RPG, I think certainly has a lot of potential. This one, in many ways though, is the reverse of the first game, whereas in Greedfall we play a colonist from the mainland coming to the island of Tyr Frdee. In the second title, we actually play a native to Tyr Frdee heading to the mainland. This one, however, will be a prequel to the original title, but of course featuring a very different setting, aimed at showcasing the political scheming and the raging plague in the background that we saw a bit of in the first title. Overall, looks interesting. Hope they manage to deliver on it, again releasing sometime this year. At number 15 though, we have Zoria, Age of Shattering. This one is actually due out on March 7th of this year, and it describes itself as a squad-based tactical RPG. This one is releasing following some Kickstarter funding a little while ago, I want to say back towards the start of 2023, I believe, but is aiming to have things like outpost and followers management, basically meaning that we're going to be leading a squad of heroes, customizing and gearing them up to take on more and more enemies. Now, if I'm being honest, I have some reservations about this one, as I have played various demos throughout the process of it, and while it could be fun enough, a lot of it was just very, very janky and rough around the edges, so I think a lot of my enjoyment of this one will be how much of that they managed to clean up. In the number 16 spot though, I would say the biggest release of the early part of the year, at least for me of course. There are a few other bigger titles releasing in the early months to be sure, but here I am talking about Dragon's Dogma 2, a follow-up to the much-loved original title, and while that one is certainly showing its age a little bit these days, was also host to a lot of jank and cut content that most people had wanted to see restored. If Dragon's Dogma 2 can do exactly that, basically give people the features and things they wanted from the first title, while also cleaning up a lot of that jank, I think they'll knock it out of the park. And a lot of the gameplay presentations and things I've seen of this title seem to imply that they are aiming to do exactly that, so it's definitely one of the games this year that I am very excited for. Coming up towards the end here, we then have, I believe it's pronounced Eiyuden Chronicles. I could be butchering that, but it is a modern take on the classic JRPG, which is becoming a bit common these days, I would say. We've seen a lot of these in the past few years, which I have been checking out for myself on occasion. This one, releasing in April, really doesn't have much competition. There is very little going on in April, at least confirmed, so unless some of these games without release dates suddenly get a bunch, I don't think this game will have too much competition that particular month, which is admittedly, at least in part, why I am planning on taking a look at it. But at any rate, it does some interesting things with, I would say, the graphics that you would probably be aware of from this type of game, so I think it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out. At number 18, however, we have Black Myth Wukong. This one coming a little bit later in the year, specifically August 19th. This one is an action RPG based upon the story Journey to the West, and it certainly looks to be a visual spectacle, if nothing else. Though as an action RPG, I think this one is going to live or die by how satisfying the combat is, though judging from what we've seen, it certainly looks pretty solid in that regard. For number 19, we have an upcoming tactical RPG known as Beast. A game about managing your warband through a series of, I would say, rather grim dark fantasy, where we take on the role of a veteran returning from a 10-year imprisonment, only to find his homeland, the Carpathians, beset by all sorts of problems, not the least of which are raiders and a plague, though as the name would imply, we also have to contend with our own beast. This game is currently in early access, so it is available to be played at the moment, and I've enjoyed what I've seen of the title, so I'm looking forward to its full release later on. Now, in the number 20 spot, we have another tactical RPG, though this one is a spin-off of 2022's Lost Eidolons, this one being Lost Eidolons Veil of the Witch. This game, a little smaller in scope, focuses in purely on the turn-based tactical battles of the Fire Emblem-like of the original title. This one doesn't have a set release date, but they are aiming for 2024, so here it is. Which does finally bring us to the last title on this list, which is yet another tactical RPG. This one being Crown Wars: The Black Prince. It'll see us managing our base of operations, our castle, where we will be recruiting, equipping, training our recruits and soldiers to confront our enemies on the battlefield, though it also promises to put a certain amount of diplomacy at the forefront as well, as you have to do things like manage your resources, etc. along the way. This one is behind the same studio as the Dungeon of Nahulbiuk, I think. I don't know exactly how to pronounce that, but the Amulet of Chaos game, which is pretty well beloved, and I get requests to review that one all the time. So this game from them as well in a similar genre seems like it has the potential to be pretty great, and I'm especially intrigued by some of what I would consider like low fantasy elements that they have on display in an otherwise, I would say, pretty medieval setting. And a previous game like Expeditions Rome showed me that you can do a surprising amount with otherwise sword and board plus archery style combat with these games, so I want to be keeping an eye on it though. This one is due out on March 7th, so not too much longer to wait for it either. But that is pretty much going to do it for this list of games of all the things I'm looking forward to this year, at least as of now as far as new releases go. Though realistically things get announced and then released all the time, it's possible to overlook things, so I'm sure this list is far from final, and it certainly doesn't include all the older titles I'd like to get around to taking a look at. But at any rate, I hope you found this list informative. Maybe it put a few games on your own radar, or maybe you're simply looking forward to the reviews. Either way though, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz, but regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.